Fallout 4, Bethesda's most recent single-player entry into the series, was met with less than stellar reviews upon its release. It came across to many fans, myself included, as easily the worst game of the main Fallout titles. I believe it was because the developers gutted many of the series' most integral principles such as character progression, player choice, the ability to resolve quests in different ways, and other elements that are key to any true role-playing game. The biggest disappointment for myself in Fallout 4 was the complete and utter removal of the skill system. The first time I launched the game, I found myself poking around the Pip-Boy, trying to find where the skills were to see what Bethesda had changed or added since the last game. But it surprised me to see something that I thought was so integral to the series and to RPGs as a whole had been removed. Skills are a way of steering and limiting player progression, offering a method of keeping players feeling different from one playthrough to the next, and are obviously an integral part in the replayability of any game. They alter the way we go about combat and resolve quests. But all this has been boiled down to a few speech and special checks scattered throughout Fallout 4. But they're nothing like the checks of older titles, which allowed players to avoid combat, draw out useful information from people in conversation, extort and blackmail enemies. They've just been reduced to requests for more caps as a reward for each quest, or information that's only slightly relevant to what's at hand. This has completely removed any ability for us as players to create different types of characters, different builds, and ultimately handicaps our creativity and in-game expression. Perks have now become a sort of hybrid between the old perks and skill systems, feeling to me like a sort of watered-down fusion of both, rather than most of them giving the player a new ability, a new way of interacting with the sandbox. They all almost directly improve an already existing ability, typically combat-related. The biggest example of this is the incremental +% to a certain damage type. These perks in and of themselves aren't necessarily a bad thing, but when it's almost exclusively the only perk available, it does severely limit player options. The karma system from past games has also been entirely removed. Moral decision in Fallout 4 primarily centers around the main questline, specifically the Institute and its synthetic androids. If you believe that synthetics are soulless automatons, incapable of true and independent thought, that they are a crude facsimile of humanity imitating behind a facade of flesh, then you will likely join the Brotherhood of Steel. If you believe synths are just as much of human as organics are, capable of feeling deep and genuine emotion, having a soul of sorts, and that keeping them in servitude is slavery, then you'll probably be right at home in the Railroad. If you believe that whether synths can think or feel or not for themselves is irrelevant, that they are machines built and coded to serve as tools and are therefore property of their creators, then you will likely want to join the Institute. Or if you think that what the Institute is doing in the Commonwealth is simply immoral and you don't care about the synthetics, then the impartiality of the Minutemen will probably draw you in. While the legitimacy of synthetics being sentient or not is an excellent moral quandary, I think it doesn't have the depth or broad impact as the moral-based decisions of the main questlines in previous titles. In New Vegas, for example, the player is faced with not only the morality of the faction that they side with, but the long-term impact that particular faction will have, as whoever controls Hoover Dam will likely continue the spread of their influence over the rest of the southwest United States. In all previous Fallout titles, the game had a fairly typical sense of progression. The player starts very weak, with low health and skills, minimal equipment, and a general inability to go to different regions of the map and face more difficult enemies. Then we work our way up, gradually gaining more powerful combat abilities and items by overcoming enemies and completing quests. Fallout 4 disregarded this almost entirely by guiding the player directly towards the abandoned town of Concord in the beginning. Once the player arrives there, the sole survivor kills a small group of raiders, saves Preston along with the rest of the Minutemen. Literally moments after this, we are given a fully functional suit of power armor and a very powerful minigun fully stocked with ammo for the price of what little health it takes to sprint through the Revolutionary War Museum. After receiving these, the player is directed to jump into the middle of Concord and cut a swath through a gang of raiders and then Deathclaw, Fallout's apex enemy. Remember, this happens within the first half hour of the player leaving Vault 111. I believe this destroys much of the game's early sense of progression, overwhetting the player's appetite by over-gratifying what little effort they've put in so far, and ruining the feeling of finally getting powerful late-game equipment. This brings me to my next issue with Fallout 4's pacing. the late game. It's at this point, approximately levels 70 through 80, that the game's scaled leveling begins to slide into the extreme levels of unbalance, especially when it comes to the health of both the player and enemies. At this point in the game, I have one of the best weapons available, a fully upgraded combat rifle and all levels of the Rifleman perk, which increases the damage of semi-automatic rifles. Despite this combat-oriented build, a Rad Scorpion still takes an entire magazine to bring down, and a Deathclaw takes almost 50 shots to be killed. During both of these fights, I was blasting away almost monotonously at the enemy, while in virtually no danger myself. Despite these being late game enemies, they deal almost zero damage to me, and I'm not in any actual danger in either of these scenarios. It's because of the enemies and myself have an absurd amount of health. It has always been a staple of RPGs to have a variety of endings to each quest. Fallout 4 has removed many of these variable quest endings and condenses each of them into a single linear mission. This is evident when we directly compare the number and quality of quests in each game. Fallout New Vegas has 80 side quests, 52 of which allow for alternate endings to the quest or offer a significant variety of ways in completing the quest. Meanwhile, out of Fallout 4's 63 side quests, a mere 18 of them allow for such player freedoms. Take for example Flag of Our Foul-Ups, a quest in which the courier is tasked with taking the reins of the Misfits, a squad of poorly performing NCR washouts, and training them to be a much more effective unit. This can end in 4 different ways depending on which squad member the courier decides to listen to. If we follow Mag's advice to teach the Misfits how to properly use their guns and explosives using each respective skill, siding with O'Hanrahan will have the courier going to each squad member and settling their squabbles via calm, polite discourse if you have a high enough speech skill. Raz sends the courier to the Great Khans to ask them for Psycho so they can use the drug to enhance their performance. Lastly, we have Poindexter, who suggests cheating by sneaking into Camp Golf and breaking into the records terminal and changing the squad's performance metrics using the sneak and science skills. This quest is not the only example, as over half of New Vegas quests allow for some player influence as to their outcome by heavily investing into different perks and skills. In Fallout 4, it's almost impossible to achieve the same level of diversity because health systems like skills have been eliminated. This leads to many parts of the game feeling samey, repetitive, and something far worse than being just bad. They're forgettable. Flags of Our Foul-Ups does have one additional ending unrelated to which member of the Misfits that you speak to, and it's achieved by slaughtering each member of the squad. This technically just fails the quest, so one might consider this point rather null, but I think it's a big part of player freedom. We should have the ability to kill virtually any NPC at will and be able to face the repercussions of our own actions, the real spirit of an RPG. But that's just another thing that Bethesda has decided to strip away from Fallout 4 by making virtually every NPC, especially quest givers, immortal. They're absolutely unable to be killed unless Bethesda gives the okay, and that typically only happens once the sole survivor has completed certain quests and milestones pertaining to that character or faction. Take Elder Maxim, for instance. After we've joined the Brotherhood as an initiate, it's impossible to take him down unless we do the questline for our rival faction. Another issue presented with the Fallout 4's quests is that some of them require the player to complete a series of missions in a specific order when it's both entirely unnecessary and doesn't make very much sense from an in-game perspective. For example, there is literally nothing that prevents a level 1 courier, fresh from Doc Mitchell's house, from strolling into the Tops Casino and putting a cap in Benny's ass. Meanwhile, the sole survivor is required to rescue Nick Valentine, go back to Diamond City, discuss your missing son, break into Kellogg's house, then use Dogmeat to track Kellogg to Fort Hagen before you ever get the chance to face him down. If the sole survivor does manage to break into Kellogg's house before the required point in the quest, the button used to access his hidden room simply isn't there. Fort Hagen is a similar story. If the player accesses it before they've tracked Kellogg there, the elevator in the basement is boarded up and inaccessible. This was an active decision made by the developers at Bethesda, and it does nothing, in my opinion, to make the game a better experience. It only removes player agency. Even Bethesda's previous entry into the series, Fallout 3, allowed for the Lone Wanderer to stumble into Vault 112 of their own accord. Player dialogue has been a hot topic for Fallout 4 since its announcement demo in June of 2015. It obviously stems from the sole survivor being fully voiced, which of course limits the length and number of lines the studio can pack into the game. This has crippled 4's ability to have a more player interaction and agency among the world. The meme about being limited to, yes, Yes, sarcastic yes, and no, but actually yes, is rather warranted. Take for example this bit of dialogue with Preston Garvey at the beginning of When Freedom Calls.
Hey.
Please, you need to listen to me.
Nope.
I'm just passing through.
Fair enough. But the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? And those raiders want us all dead.
God damn it.
Including you.
I have my own problems, Garvey.
Yeah? Like what? You help us, maybe we can help you.
That's my business.
Alright, fine. Forget I asked. But we do need your help. A month ago, there were 20 of us. Yesterday, there were 8. Now we're 5. First it was the ghouls in Lexington, and now this mess.
It's a cruel world.
You think I don't know that? The things I've seen. The things I've done. Anyway, we figured Concord would be a safe place to settle.
Maybe?
Those raiders proved us wrong.
Nope.
But, well, we do have one idea.
Better be a good one.
Sturgis, tell her.
There's a crashed vertibird up on the roof. Old school. Pre-war. You might have seen it. Well, looks like one of its passengers left behind a seriously sweet goodie. We're talking a full suit of cherry T-45 power armor. Military issue.
This is crazy.
Just hear me out. Get the suit. You can rip the minigun right off the vertibird. Do that, and those raiders get an express ticket to hell. You dig?
It's a suicide mission.
Look, new gal. Don't know what cave you're from, don't care. But you need to shake off the cobwebs and smell the cordite. Or we're all dead anyway. So here's the deal. That armor's out of juice. Probably has been for 100 years. It can be powered up again. But we're a bit stuck.
The answer's no. I'm out.
Just like that, huh? You come this far, then condemn these poor people to die? All right. Have it your way. Stay safe. Maybe at least one of us will survive this.
At every possible opportunity in this conversation, I am refusing to aid the Minutemen, but the conversation keeps being looped back around into asking me again and again, and when I say the final no, I receive the quest anyway. What's the point? Sure, I can leave after this point and I don't have to save the Minutemen, but I shouldn't be receiving the quest once I've refused it. This feels like someone brand new to being a game master in a tabletop RPG trying to railroad me into their desired choice. The dialogue UI also made certain conversations pan out in a very bad manner by making the same mistake of the Mass Effect games. It not only puts the nice and mean options in the same place each time, it only gives a summary of dialogue options rather than a full sentence, which often leads the player into saying something entirely unintended. Towns and cities are one of the bigger focuses of Fallout games, collections of people, ghouls, and even mutants living together in anything from shacks slapped together with sheet metal and dental floss like Girder Shade, to flourishing metropolises such as New Vegas or Vault City. Fallout 4 has managed to take these away as well. There are only 9 major settlements in Fallout 4, compare that to 14 in New Vegas, and 15 in Fallout 3. These are places that give the wasteland life. They're full of interesting places, people brimming with stories and information, items to steal, traders to barter with, and quest givers. There are far fewer of these unique places in Fallout 4. They've instead been replaced by the generic settlement system. While this does allow us to set up many of these smaller towns in a way we see fit, it does remove a lot of the unique qualities that the pre-built towns have, most notably NPCs. Crazies like Nobark and Confessor Cromwell, the easygoing folk like Doc Mitchell and the King, and even assholes like Jericho and Boxcars have all been replaced by generic settler number 682. Having heard me do nothing but complain about what I see as issues with the game, you would probably think that I hate Fallout 4. I don't. Quite the contrary, actually. I enjoyed Fallout 4, just not merely enough to compete with other Fallout games as one of my favorites. All of these things distract from the in-game experience to such a degree that I worry about the future of my favorite series. The series has done a complete 180-degree turn, going from what I see as the greatest RPGs in all of gaming to what could barely be considered an RPG at all, and it is for these reasons that I think Fallout 4 was a step in the wrong direction for the series. Until next time, thank you for watching.